Hello, listener. I'm so glad you're here. Today's discussion highlights two of the authors in the upcoming book, Are We Friends or Coworkers? Exploring Relationships at Work. This book's scheduled to be published in just a few weeks on May 30th. This book has 24 contributing authors from the Changing Work Collective. Changing Work is an online community of conscious humans who aim to change work from the inside out. If you're interested in checking out any of Changing Work's books, you can find them on bookshop.org, that's bookshop.org, or amazon.com. My name is Wainwright Yu. I'm a technology leader and leadership coach who focuses on helping neurodivergent people uncover their unique strengths and thrive. I'm also a member of Changing Work, and I'm an author from Changing Work's second book, Leading with Compassion. I'll be your host today. Our authors for today's panel discussion are Bhavani Mantena and Christy Sando. Hello, Bhavani. Hello, Christy. How are you today?
Okay, how are you doing?
Great, glad to be here.
Thank you so much for spending time with all of us today. Let's start with some quick introductions. Tell us who you are, what brought you to Changing Work, and what brought you to becoming a co-author for this book. Why don't we start with you, Bhavani?
So I'm a business and technology integration specialist. I work on business transformation journeys for all the Fortune 500 companies. So I do work on change management as well. So recently, like 6 years ago, my self-awareness journey started and practicing yoga, and I was a part of Inner MBA. Then I met Scott Shute there in the Inner MBA program. So when he was talking about this, I was excited. I've been wanting to write a book for a very long time. When Scott gave us this opportunity, I'm like, well, I don't know how to write a book, but I would like to write a book. I would do that, right? So then I gave my little bit of story to them. They accepted my application, and that's how. And it's been a great journey since then, though, right? I learned a lot in terms of writing the book, in terms of editing and all the conscious practices that Changing Works does, monthly forums and weekly forums and all of that. I've been enjoying that journey so far. So that's me.
Thank you, Bhavani. How about you, Christy?
My way to finding Changing Work Collective was also very similar to Pavani's. I was also a member of the Inner MBA. I was doing a lot of meditation and yoga and mindfulness practices on my own, and I was looking for a way to integrate those into my work in the tech industry and into my daily life throughout. And I was really happy to find the Inner MBA. And then when the Changing Work Collective came around, then that was the perfect fit, I think. So it's really exciting to see. I saw that the first book was being published and I was very curious. And then the second book, and I said, okay, I have to do this too. I want to jump in there. And this is a great topic. And I thought, yeah, it's a great way to do it with other people. So you share the experience. And for me, that was really, really valuable to share this experience. It's not just you writing off alone by yourself, but a really supportive group and people with similar interests and goals coming together to do something. So that's a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
Being vulnerable with each other too, right? Sharing with each other. It really, I learned a lot in terms of not just writing a book, but in terms of embodiment of consciousness and sharing with each other.
True.
I agree. It's called Changing Work Community for a reason, and it's really the community aspect that really makes a difference. Thank you for that. So you mentioned, Christy, the topic or the theme of the book. So each book that Changing Work publishes has a different theme to it. The theme of this book, the third of its kind, is Are We Friends or Coworkers? So when you first heard that theme, what came to mind for you?
Oh, I thought that was a really interesting topic. So, as a US American who's been living and working in Germany basically my whole career, it was super interesting because there are sort of these intercultural aspects of friendship as well. So, sort of the Midwestern friendliness is something that I grew up with. And in Europe, friendliness can be seen a little bit differently. It can seem a little more reserved or colder to some people, but that's always been something that I've had a lot of fun being aware of and sort of playing with in my professional life. And it's something that, yeah, I think there's like everything, too big of a dose or inappropriate dose could go wrong, but just the right amount, and finding that sweet spot and what's good for everyone, being able to show up authentically and really do good work together, that's fun. And I think coming to work with the spirit of friendship and openness and goodwill is key to getting good things done.
Yeah, with this topic of just hitting the right amount, I think we'll touch on a little bit in one or both of your chapters. So I'll save a follow-up question on that till later. How about you, Bhavani? What was your initial reaction when you heard the theme of the book?
So when I heard about Are We Friends or Coworkers, I was like, in a lot of my, I'm being in consulting in a lot of my projects, in international projects, having traveled to multiple countries. People are friendly on the surface, right? Like when it comes to real purpose, getting things done. Sometimes there is a lack of integrity sometimes like going overboard with the friendliness and getting into a problem, like the way my story evolved, right? The first story that I wrote about in my chapter, right? So then, but at the same time, having the friendliness and coming together, supporting each other for a common purpose to collaborate with each other. And I have had great friends like that too during my course of the career, right? I'm like, where do we draw the line, right? It's like she said, the right amount, right? Where do we draw the line? To what extent it's good being friends, to what extent that we have to be colleagues, right? So the boundaries, that's where I started the topic of boundaries there. Given my experience,
yeah. Oh, go ahead, Bhavana.
given my experience with multiple experiences that I had in terms of being friends, in terms of being colleagues, and where I did not know where to draw the line in the initial stages of my career, right? So that's where I came up with this chapter.
Yes. I think you're starting to talk about your chapter, so I'd love to just dive in right there. And so you're right that you open your chapter with a pretty powerful story. It was quite gripping, actually. Would you be willing to share a little bit about that story with our audience today?
Well, yeah, those days I used to be open to taking up any work, not saying no, and be nice to people. And if people are friendly, I'm also friendly with them. If they're playing around, I was very like easygoing type, right? So that's how the story evolved. So that the consultant friend of mine, he was sitting at the backside of me and then making a lot of noises. When I said not to do that, they were making even more so, right? So at that point in time, so my story, the way it evolved was, and then I stopped responding to him, and he blocked my way, and I was like, this is not acceptable. And I went inside, and he flipped the story to his advantage, right? So I was like, those days, probably I was not knowing what my needs are, what my values are, not being able to speak up, to be authentic to myself, right? That time, I started questioning myself, right? What's going wrong here, right? So what is the real issue here, right? It's not about what they said. It's about, am I aware of my own values? Am I being authentic to myself? And then if I was aware of myself, I can be aware of others' needs. And at the same time, I can respond to things better than reacting to it, right? So even though I just walked away with like silence, one could see the anger all over me, right? The reaction to it, anyone can see that, right? So there were a lot of situations like that. That story to me was very unacceptable, right? So that the way even the company kind of handled that, I was like, this is not fair, right? Unfairness, right? So things are never fair in life anyways. It's how we handle it matters, right? That's where that story stuck to me for a long time. So that's where I started like understanding myself first, being aware of myself, so that I can respond to the world in a better way. That's where my father told me when I was young, similar situations, I used to get frustrated and yell at people, right? My dad used to come and say, hey, no, you have to first set the boundaries up front so that no one will walk over you. If you let people walk over you, and then if you react to it, you'll become bad at the end of the day. Don't do that, right? I was like 7 years old or 8 years old, and my dad passed away when I was 17. But I always remember that, right? But I couldn't do that all through my life until recently for 6 years when my self-awareness journey started.
And on the topic of boundaries, where would you draw Like, what advice would you give to someone around how to draw those boundaries now, knowing that, it's hard to sometimes strike the right balance?
So it's like basically what are we doing together, right? What is the collective purpose we are going with, right? So understanding what your feelings are first, and what your values are and needs are, and then understanding where the other person is coming from, whether or not we're all going to the same purpose, even though there are like differences between each other, the way they think and the way I think and all that, right? So first understand the common purpose, understand yourself, what your values and needs are, and then what the other person's values and needs are. Pause a little bit to see what you're feeling so that you can pause and then see, is it really helping me, whatever I want to convey right now? Is it helping me or the other person also as a team in a collective way? If we all keep the collectiveness as a common purpose, right, then we all can work together with boundaries, right? Like, so then setting the boundary would be easier, right? Say, for example, my role is to do a particular task, my role is a different role. If somebody comes and asks me, hey, you have to do this work even though it's not your role, right? There is a way to politely say, no, what is your priority? Is my work is priority? What your work is priority, right? So kind of like coming up to saying that whether or not the differences, the boundaries are helping the common purpose, right? And also not to gossip, not to share your personal matters too much. We've all been there. We've all understood what the issues are. So it's just drawing the line with just the right amount of sharing or vulnerability and all that.
I'm curious, Christy, did you have any additional thoughts on the topic of boundaries, having heard the conversation so far?
Yeah, I really appreciated the list of these different aspects of boundaries that Bhavani shares with us in her chapter. I really appreciate these different things to reflect on, and I think it's really nice to remember. I also remember earlier days in my career where I didn't have as much experience, and this sort of reactivity, that after time you kind of learn what the stakes are, and where you are, and you learn about your values. And yeah, but sometimes if someone does something that's out of the ordinary, it's jarring, and then you think about how you're reacting to that. But just as Bhavani writes in her story, how she evolved to know what's important, and to know the values and the goals, and keep that in mind, and always keep that in center, and it's not getting personal and things like that. Then you can really yeah, kind of respond to things with more equal footing, and not get so jarred if something comes up that's not expected. And I think that's really supported by a mindfulness practice and a conscious approach to our work, and a human approach. So understanding people have needs and have their values and goals as well that they're pursuing, and then just seeing where we can come together and how we can work best together for that. That's what I think.
Yeah, one of the things that the book tees up in the title itself is the juxtaposition between the word friend and coworker, and sort of you would intuit that there's a difference between those two types of relationships. So going back to you, Bhavani, in a workplace where you think boundaries are well set, like defined in an optimal way, let's frame it that way. Like, what word would you use to describe the relationship people have with each other in that circumstance?
Optimal way, right? If everyone is clear about their clarity is important, right? Everyone is being clear about their responsibilities, everyone being clear about the vision where we're going towards, and then respecting each other, being compassionate with each other, right? Perfect world will never exist, to be honest with you. This is how we handle the situation matters, right? So even if something frustrates you, pausing and reflecting on that and see what is that telling you. I used to think like, why is this happening to me, right? Why are people doing this to me? My primary question have always been that. Now it's revolving to, I think about what is this telling me, right? Once I understand what is this telling me, and then understanding the other person, being compassionate, right? Where the other person is coming from. No one is perfect. Everyone has different way of doing things. Everyone has different values. Coming to that common ground, it's tough. It's not always easy. But in the perfect world, like everyone being friendly, supporting each other, understanding the common vision is more important at the workplace, right?
Yeah.
So
As
being a
also-
woman,
yeah.
being a woman, that to a brown woman, I faced a lot of discrimination in a lot of places, but I don't want to get there, but I'm just saying, you know, it's just understanding the other person's behavior or attitude and needs or values. That way we can be assertive about our values too, right? So it's just a common ground.
Yeah, I agree. And do you think that there's room for friendship in a workplace? And you know, if there is, like, how much is the right amount in your mind?
There's always a room for friendship, right? Friendship, like at the personal level or professional level. Like if people are compassionate to each other, if people are supporting each other to get things done on time. So not necessarily like competing with each other, right? Like the competition spoils everything, right? So supporting each other to get things done. Then there can always be friendship, right? There are some friends that I met at workplace. A lot of colleagues are still friends with me, right? We're good friends. It's just like how we leave that place, right? How the feeling that we have, the energy the energy exchange is more important, right? So that energy exchange can last forever, actually. There are some friends that are lifelong friends from me, right? But still they're work friends. They may not be my personal friends, but that friendship will still continue. It's just that energy exchange and getting things done with the similar attitude and similar values. There definitely exists friendship. But we shouldn't, I mean, one thing I faced is like oversharing and being too easy never worked for me, right? Fine, I'll take up whatever it can. I'll just be a sport, whatever they say, and not being effectively speaking up about what you like, or like self-care, right? Self-awareness and not caring for if you're not showing compassion to yourself, if it's all about the other person and being nice is not going to work, right? So just like equal amount, like giving importance to ourselves first, and then make the other person important after.
Yeah, that makes sense. Even in friendships, there's a give and take relationship in friendships. It's not a sort of one directional relationship for sure.
If I don't care for if I don't care for myself, I cannot care for others, right? If I don't love myself, I cannot give any of the support to the other person too. So that's what I learned in a hard way.
Yeah. It's funny, just a funny story. I've been talking to a few people who have kindness, strengths like kindness and forgiveness as, some of their most used strengths or most notable strengths. And then as I talk to them, it's very frequent that we'd find it being used only in one direction, meaning it's like kindness to others or forgiveness to others, but then it's not applied to the self. And somehow we forget that these values should apply in both directions, right? You should be kind to others and kind to yourself. You should forgive others and forgive yourself.
Exactly. It should start from you first, right? It should start from us first. Exactly. Mm-hmm. That's the balance. I agree with
you. Fantastic. Thank you, Bhavani. I would love to move on to your chapter, Christy. In it, you talk about how you spent 18 years at a company that you thought you'd work in for just 2 years. So that's was that 9 times longer than you had predicted. So maybe share with the audience, like, what was it that made you stay in that role for so long?
So the company had just spun off from another one, and we were getting our foothold. We had one really big customer. We needed to diversify that a little bit. We wanted to grow the company. We were technically in some really niche areas. We had some really good experts there. And we were able to grow the company with really interesting projects and super interesting companies, really big companies, internationally active. And I think it was always refreshing for them to work with this young, dynamic group of people. We were very interdisciplinary, the teams, and coming together, looking for new approaches. We weren't bogged down by lots of constraints that big organizations have. We were flexible and pragmatic, sometimes opportunistic in our approach, the way a lot of startups and scale-ups are. So looking what's out there and seeing how we can make the most of a situation when we're faced with challenges. And we had a lot of challenges in 18 years, you can imagine, in the tech industry. So things changing and technology is changing really, really a lot. But we always had sort of our core values and the way we like to work together. And it was a very friendly, still is a very friendly place. It's changed quite a lot since then. But it was really the values that kind of held us together. Lots of people are still with that organization. So it was fun. We were always doing interesting projects with fun customers and could always learn something new. We had a leader. It was owner-operated company at that time, and he had a really great can-do mindset, and he was very open to trying new things. And in a smaller IT company, then you really see if things work well or not. You get feedback really quickly with the customer. So you can try things out. And that made it a lot of fun. So we were doing interesting things and working together really as a lot of us are friends. So it was always refreshing, I think, also for our customers then, who were used to working with bigger tech consultancies and software makers and things like this. So working together with an implementation partner who worked a little bit differently and saw the world a little bit differently was refreshing for them too. So it was a really fun time.
Yeah, one of the themes that I can hear from your description, which Bhavani actually mentioned earlier as well, is this idea of having a goal that everybody shares across the group and that you're pursuing it together. Although you did also mention that it just felt like a very friendly place, like, and I'm curious how you would define what that feels like to have a sort of friendly culture that sounds like it's nourishing and something that you really enjoyed.
Yeah.
How would you describe that experience?
Absolutely. I think it was really fostered from the top. So it was from our owner and top manager. And then as we became more mature and added more people to the management team, we were working together with a consultant who was actually an organizational psychologist and into Alfred Adler. And so it was a very mindful approach about how we wanted to work together, and that was replicated throughout the company. So we kind of had our way of working together and being collaborative and helping each other out. So that was just something that was practiced throughout the company. So that was something that was really instilled in us, and it was just the way we worked. So that's the way we knew it. And a lot of people who started their careers there, it's just the way you think the world works, maybe. So it's really lucky in that regard. But it really, it was a unique time, and it was a wonderful time, and lots of really great colleagues. We got to know, and fun customers. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I wish I had this specific study source in mind, but both you and Bhavani mentioned this idea of when you're working on projects together, you do build friendships. And there has been sort of research in this idea that if you go through a tough situation together, that just creates a lasting bond. And it's a shared experience, a shared experience that you guys can take forward. And that for sure is true in an environment like the one you were talking about.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And I really believe that this positivity and this, seeing possibilities, even in challenges, and in change projects, I think that's really something that, that I can help companies master because I've practiced it for so long. So that's something that I'm interested in doing. That's, something dear to my heart. It's really like finding the possibilities and, helping everybody bring their best self to work.
Absolutely.
I enjoyed reading Christy's chapter, like the way she brought the people together with friendliness, being a good leader. Like there's a lot to learn from you, Christy. I enjoyed reading your chapter.
Thank you, Pavani.
Christy, the other topic you explore in your chapter is the idea of friendship in a virtual work environment. And nowadays, now that we're post-pandemic, virtual work is less prevalent than it was 2 years ago, but it's still very much a reality for many of us. In fact, we're doing this virtually right now, this interaction. So is there anything that you'd share to the audience around what you've learned about building that connection, that sort of culture and connection and friendliness in that new environment, whether it's a virtual one or a hybrid one where virtual and physical interactions are interacting over time?
Sure. So the second sort of story in my chapter was about after I had started at a relatively very young company, but they weren't used to working virtually. It was a startup, and they were used to being in the office and doing things quickly together and having short distances to find the experts. And as the company grew, so we had the one aspect was the company growing, the other aspect was COVID. We were locked down, so we were in home office, and a lot of the practices we weren't used to working that way. So from my previous experience, I was used to working that way. I was used to helping companies learn to work that way from our customer perspective. But the company itself wasn't really well versed in this. And I think a lot of in the beginning, we were having really long meetings with really lots of people to try and, kind of emulate this, and it just doesn't work that effectively. And if you're relatively new in the company like I was, and you need to make contacts with people throughout the company, it's really difficult to do without some intentionality behind it, because you get a sense of who the people are in meetings. But if you have a meeting with 15 people, how many people are actually going to talk in that meeting, and how meaningful is that connection going to be? How much are you really going to understand what they're doing, or they're saying that because someone else is in the meeting who has to hear what they want to hear? So there are things like that going on. And it's a very demanding environment. And then I think it was difficult for some people to see, okay, it's a demanding environment, but I don't want to be demanding of my colleagues. So I want to be human. I want to show up. I want to understand how they're doing. And COVID really, was a big challenge for a lot of people, finding how to work in this new mode. And managing children, managing space in your apartment when suddenly two people need to work from home, and things like that. And all the other stress that went along with it. And then, it felt like some relentless meetings at the beginning, just trying to find the connection and trying not to lose something that we had in a physical space before that was really contained. But there was no spontaneity and no sort of these accidental conversations. You didn't meet anybody on the bus on the way to work. You didn't talk to people in the hallway when you cross paths and understand what they're working on, or see a stressed face, because everybody just shows up to the meeting and then disperses again when the agenda is ticked off. So that was something that I was really intentional about, was finding time, making time, but finding it with other people. Everybody's really busy, but saying, hey, can we meet for 10 minutes next week sometime? Let's have a virtual coffee together. And a lot of people were happy to have that proposal, that suggestion, the invitation, just to take a break and talk about how things are going and how they're doing, and what pressures they face. Because maybe, the news that you get at the company level is different than what's actually going on, and maybe there's something you can help them with, or maybe they can help you with something you're struggling with. So that was really my key there, and it just built relationships that were then sustainable then for the future. We could always call on that person, and it was like calling on a friend. And of course it wasn't I don't know how to say it. It was, it was mutual, and it was reciprocal, and it was appreciative. And I think that makes a big difference when you're, helping each other out at work. And I think that's for me like what the sort of the friendship aspect is. And you mentioned the study. I think there are lots of studies about like high performing teams and resilient teams and all of these characteristics. And I just think a lot of these characteristics are pretty similar to characteristics that you read about or think about when you think about good friends. So that's yeah, what I was interested in exploring, and I'm still interested in exploring that. But I think that's a good topic, and that's just what kind of came out for me then in going into this rich topic that we explored in the book. And it's so interesting to see how the authors dealt with it in different ways and the different stories and experiences that people bring. So that's really exciting to see.
Absolutely.
Team bonding, a virtual team bonding. What you're saying?
Pardon me?
Team bonding, right? That's what you're saying, right?
Oh yeah, also individuals as well. So yeah. But like you said, if everybody has the same the shared goal, then they can pull together and work for that. So it can be teams, it can be individuals. Sure.
The couple of thoughts for you, Kirsty. I think one on what makes strong teams. There's many different research as you call out, but one of the elements that does help with strong teams is this idea of psychological safety. It certainly feels easier to feel safe with people you know, people you trust, people who you would consider, your friends, or part of a community with you. So that resonates a lot. I think the other thing that came to mind for me as you were talking was I remember during the pandemic we would have these sort of virtual happy hours, and it was a little honestly it was a little hard to get it started at first because we have the virtual environment made it more transactional. Like every meeting had an agenda, and when you're done with your agenda, you log out. Like creating basically a container of space and time for something less structured was initially hard. And it's just amazing how you're able to do that in your own case. And I think that really helps a lot. That's one of the nice things about being in a physical environment where you're there and you're going to be there till a certain time. And so you might as well fill that time with something you were not expecting. And that's a little more challenging virtually. Do you have any tips, Christian? What made those 10-minute chats more successful for you that you might share with others?
I think it was really just asking people how they were doing and listening. So I think that was maybe the most important thing that I could notice at that time. We did experiment with things. We had some bigger company meetings, and then we had sort of it was a little bit like a chat roulette kind of thing. It would just sort of like bounce people into meetings together, and then you'd be with somebody completely different. And I think any tools or things like that you can experiment with when people are willing, then it's really fun. I also, made connections to people that I'd never talked to before with things like that, but it definitely was just, reaching out, having a coffee with someone, hearing how they're doing, hearing, oh, there's this really big target that the product team has. How are they managing that? Or there's a big restructuring somewhere, how's the team over there doing in that region and things like that. So just being personable and asking people how things are going. And yeah, that's yeah. And experimenting, maybe experimenting with things if you come up with some ways to do that. Yeah, sure.
Making connections, right? Making real connections, personal connection there, right? That's important.
There's something powerful about asking how are you and actually getting a real response, and showing that you really want, like you're really interested versus the typical like I'm good.
Like caring for each other, right? That's what is more important, caring for each other.
Right. And sometimes you don't need a lot of time, and I think you could do a structured approach, or you could have a topic, or you could make a book club or something like that, and have or have a happy hour or something like that. I think there are lots of different ways you can do it. But, if there's just somebody that you sense in a meeting, has something to say or might be having a hard time, or you're just more curious about someone, reach out and ask them if they wouldn't mind having coffee. And then you can say, hey, this is what I'm working on. What are you doing? How are you? What's up?
And also some fun games, right? For stress relieving, like people can play some fun games for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, come together.
Sure.
One more question for you, Christy. We all work in teams at the office. Should we be friends with everyone on our team?
That's a good question. I think we should be friendly with everybody on our team. And I think everybody, yeah, there's this thing I'm trying to think. There's a book, The Art of Possibility, and they talk about giving everyone an A. So it's a book that I read years ago. So give everyone an A and someday they'll earn it, something like this. So there's something like that. So and there's another quote, Randy Pausch in his last lecture, he was talking about if you give people enough time, if you wait long enough, people will surprise and impress you. So maybe there are people you click with right away and you say, oh, this is easy. This is an easy interaction. We're in sync with our goals and our values. I can really tell I can work really easy with this person. And some people, for any reason, any number of reasons, it's just a little bit more difficult. But you don't have to, make a bunch of stories about why or something like that. I think just accept people as they are, and one day they're going to surprise and impress you. And I think always showing up with this attitude of this possibility for people is really important. And I think Bhavani's lesson of really knowing your values and knowing to speak and say what you need, and have expectations of others, I think then it's completely fair. But I think always showing up with this friendly attitude and curiosity and patience is really helpful. So maybe there's somebody is just more difficult for me to connect to in the team. We don't have to be best friends. I think there are different kinds and depths of friendship, and I'm not going to work to meet all of my best friends, and everybody on my team is going to be my best friend, and I'm going to tell them all my secrets. Like, please don't. I'm not promoting that at all. But just going with the friendliness and the possibility that we are all there together to do our best work, and
Openness.
we can do that. Yeah.
Basically open to each other. That's more important, right?
Sure.
Yeah. I love that response. Thank you so much, Chris. It's sort of like you don't have to be friends, but you have to be open to friendship, or approach people with an openness. I really like that takeaway. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
So Bhavani, Christy, first of all, thank you so much. I've learned so much from reading your chapters as well as this conversation about what it means to belong and how deeper relationships across many different facets of our lives, including our work, can play an important role. Do you have any final thoughts to share with our audience before we close for the day?
You want to start, Christy?
I think interaction with others is so interesting and so important. So stay curious, try things out, be open, be caring, and be compassionate.
Bhavani?
I would agree, right? Be compassionate and be playful a little bit. Have some fun along with the work. Don't be too serious about just work, right? Make connections, not necessarily too much personal level, but make connections. Stay curious and be engaging. Be compassionate. Fun can also bring people together, right? There should be some fun aspect of it. And like set the boundaries, where you need to, but it doesn't have to be hard boundaries. Like energy is very important, right? For me, like energy, connection, say the kind of the energy that we kind of project, right? It should be like to be like safe environment, right? Like come up with some kind of safe energy to the other person too, right? Sense of safety.
Mm.
And I know, Bhavani, your chapter focused a lot on those sort of setting those boundaries. something reset on my end. Yeah, so I was just about to say, your chapter focused a lot on setting those boundaries and making sure that we take care of ourselves along the way. And I guess my reflection, having thought about it and listening to you speak about it, is taking care of ourselves and taking care of others are not opposites.
Right.
It's like, if you practice kindness to yourself, you actually enable yourself to be kinder to others. And if you practice forgiveness to yourself, you enable yourself to be more forgiving to others. So it's both, doing both make us more able to show up in the right way.
It's the embodiment, right? If we can embody compassion and kindness, it will show up everywhere, not just for yourself.
Mhm.
That's right.
Thank you again so much for sharing your wisdom with our listeners, our readers, and the Changing Work community. Before we conclude our session for today, if our listeners would like to learn more about you or contact you, what would be the best way to do that? Let's start with you this time, Bhavani.
My phone, my email, right? My email is there with Changing Works and LinkedIn, and my number is there as well, my WhatsApp. All three is good for me. Like you can connect me through either phone number or my LinkedIn.
And that's in Circle, you mean, Bhavani? So if you join Changing Work, you'd be part of Circle, and all of that information is available on Circle.
Exactly. My email is there too, right? With the Changing Works. Yes.
How about you, Christy?
Same here. Just look for Christy Sando on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to connect and have some interesting conversations.
Awesome. Thank you, Bhavani and Christy. Just to close our session for the day, just a reminder, Changing Work's third collaborative book, Are We Friends or Coworkers? Exploring Relationships at Work, is scheduled to be published on May 30th. So that's coming really soon. If you enjoy this conversation, we invite you to explore our first two best-selling books. The first one is called Leading with Self-Awareness, Starting from the Inside Out, and Leading with Compassion, Cultivating Connection from the Inside Out. Both are available on bookshop.org, that's bookshop.org, and amazon.com. If this conversation sparked something meaningful for you, please consider sharing it with your network. And if you'd like to connect with others on the journey to create more conscious, human-centered workplaces, we invite you to learn more about our growing community at changingwork.org. That's changingwork.org. Thank you for being part of the movement to change work from the inside and out. Have a wonderful day.